your video that we are creating for the Scorpio full moon. We're going to be looking at the moon in general, the influences that we have from Pluto. We're going to touch on the Mars-Neptune conjunction that's coming up. And what you're going to get from this video is some clarity around how this is impacting you in your daily life, some tools for successfully and what's this word, like joyfully, abundantly moving through Taurus season, and understanding how the full moon can be something very powerful for you, and touching a little bit on Pluto because of the power that we can work with there. And let me introduce to you, and touching a little bit on Pluto because of, wow. Okay, so we're live on YouTube. So let me introduce Megan, who is going to be co-hosting with me. This is Megan. Introduce yourself, Megan.
Well, I've been practicing astrology for, I'd say, a decade, precisely 9 years. There's some lead into that, and I've been just found so much validation in my understanding of astrology when I found Anjani, and we were able to share the practice of astrology together. And I love having astrology conversations with Anjani, so I'm excited to be co-hosting this. And I am living in Floyd, Virginia, creating a off-grid back to nature retreat.
Wonderful. So let's go ahead and start off by getting grounded and centered on earth, wherever you are. Notice where you're sitting. Get into your body, like really connected into your body. Every time you inhale, there is a breath that enters in through the nose and pushes downward to your pelvis, diaphragm expanding. Every time you exhale, diaphragm squeezes and contracts, the air rises up and exits through the nose. So notice that happening in your body. And then we're going to take a moment and acknowledge the place that we are, the land that we're on, the spirits of this land that we're on, acknowledging all that it takes for us to live, all the people, all the non-physical beings that it takes for us to live, and getting grounded and centered. So we're going to place ourselves, and I'm looking at the chart now so we can see that the earth is in the center, and we're actually calculating all of the movements of the planet from the very center core of the earth. So when we're sitting here, if we stick our arms straight out, we would be able to find the sun and the moon, and they're going to be exactly opposite each other today at 4:50 p.m. So when it's about that time, this is Pacific Standard Time, you can place your arm to point directly at the sun, and then make that T shape with your body, and you will know that the moon, even though you might not be able to see it yet, is gonna, well, you have, yeah, we'll see. Because I'm like, oh, wait a minute, 4:50, the sun is gonna be really bright. Oh, we won't see the moon yet, because it's gonna be still in the it'll still be in the upward position. But if you place your arms in a straight T, you'll be able to know exactly where the moon is. So every time we get to a full moon, that is the biggest portion. This relates with ovulation in the female body, the ovulation phase. So this moon cycle started in Aries. It was actually Aries new moon. And so when we're looking at the moon, the fullness of the moon, we look to Mars, because Aries is ruled by the sign of by the planet Mars. So we'll be focusing a little bit on what Mars is doing in the sky at the time of this full moon, to get some more ideas about what we're working with. And then the sun is in Taurus. And so that opposition between the sun and moon is what creates the full moon. Something that I was thinking about today is this Vesica Pisces, where if you imagine one of these circles being the sun, the other circle being the moon, when they are in perfect alignment to each other, this is representing polarity. And then there's this little space in the center, which is that space between polarity. And every time we have a full moon, we're working with that polarity. And so what we're going to discover today in this video is like, what is the polarity of the sun and moon, just in general, and then getting more specific to the signs that the sun and moon are in. And then we'll look at the rulership. So we'll look at Venus and Mars, because for the sun and Taurus, the planetary ruler is Venus. And so we look to those planets to find out more about the specifics of what we're working with at the full moon. Okay, is anything from that stirring up anything you want to mention, Megan?
Yeah, I just love how you were saying about putting your arms out and feeling the sun and the moon at the full moon. I always think how you see the moon rise at sunset. So
Yeah.
even if it's not the exact moment when it is the full moon, when the moon is full, and there's usually give or take 3 days where people are like, oh, look, it's the full moon. And we know if you really get, when you really get into astrology, you look at the specific time when it's most exact. But yeah, at the time when the sun is setting, you'll see that moon rising right directly across from it. That also kind of awakens that feeling of polarity in the experience of seeing the full moon come up on one horizon, which would be the eastern horizon, while the sun is setting at the western horizon. Feeling that opening polarity.
Yeah, so the when the sun is setting, this is every time when the sun is setting, it's setting, like Megan said, it's setting on the western horizon. So just from that alone and getting a real experiential feeling of that, we can tune into west, which is the end of the day, the beginning of the night. And then on that eastern horizon, see, they're switched now, because in the morning time, the sun is going to be rising on that eastern horizon. And it's so exciting to me because of having this, like, my first real study in astrology was with the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which doesn't do rulerships. It doesn't really focus so much on houses. It's 100% on the experience of the planets and their cycles. So that's my first language, is like, where are we in time and space? And if we didn't have all this technology, what would we know about where we are in time or space just by observing the stars and the planets? And so the polarity of the sun and moon, regardless of what sign they're in, it's going to be, sun has this, if you think about your own heart, it is this big radiant expression that's like constantly pumping and fueling your entire life. And like, it's your overall style and your shine. So I always think of this heart center because of the way that it's your glow. Like, you can tell when somebody's really healthy because their skin is radiant and glowing, and that's their blood flow. That's their their fuel. So that's the sun. So you can think about the sun, of your body connected with the sun in the sky. And then likewise the moon, which when I tune into moon in my body, I feel into my pelvis, and that watery, in the ancient chakra system, the crescent moon is shown in the Svadhisthana chakra, which is in the pelvic bowl. So tuning into that lower energy in my body, there's watery, oh my gosh, emotions, and what I like to call emotional currency. It's your ability to adapt and be fluid and sensual, and it's very nonverbal. It's very feeling oriented, and not everybody's going to know about your moon. Not everybody's going to know about your inner reality. So that is in the body, and then looking out at the sky and being able to see them in perfect opposition to each other. So we have this polarity of how you can see my face being flushed, and you can see the energy that I'm bringing into the room, and then that mystery of what's going on in her real inner reality. Megan, do you have anything about that you want to add?
Yeah. And I mean, we can understand this too because the moon is reflective. So that light, that moonlight is a reflection. So it's that internal
Mm.
knowing. Like, and the another thing that really was an early, I'll always remember hearing this maybe just a few years into getting into astrology, your the sun in astrology is who you are by the light of the sun for the most part, while the moon is who you are by the light of the moon for the most part. So you can think like, unless you're nocturnal, that's also your dreaming self. Like mostly that's your inner self, or the, like you said, not everybody is going to see that moon side of your moon side. Not everyone's going to see that side of you. Those who you share moonlight with are those that understand that more. It's not the same expression of self that you give, at the grocery store, on your midday walk through town. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that so much. So yeah, they work together. Like this
Yeah.
this thing. They are together. They're part of a polarity, and in our body they work together. And then this centerpiece is what I've been like for probably the last, like, I don't know, I will say like the last 10 years I've been really like, ooh, what's that place in the center? So we can find when we get too much into daytime reality, into our solar expression, and like, oh, how am I tending to my inner reality? And which, when you and I were diving together into Temple of the Moon, that was where I was really getting into like, how can I bring more of this lunar quality? And then I got so into lunar quality. I was like waking up early and taking walks like at 4 a.m. and like being really into that darkness. And then like, oh wait, so like finding the the place in between somewhat, and being able to not necessarily stay there, but like just noticing when you're being one or the other, and then keep coming back to that middle piece, in some sort of way. You don't have to. It's like I think in the terms of health, and anytime we go extreme on one end or the other, it's extremes aren't uh, part of a healthy experience in my reality. So anyway, let me not talk about that, but let's look now at the signs of the sun and moon. So now we've really gotten into our body and experience about, okay, the sun, when the sun is setting. Sun right now is, at the time of the full moon, is going to be 4 degrees, 18 minutes of Taurus. So you can look at your chart. I would extend that anywhere between 0 and 8, because this is going to be the place in your chart, in your life, that's really illuminated. If you don't know, do not worry about that at all. It really doesn't matter, because you're going to experience it. And the chart just adds some nuance that makes it a little bit more fun, and you can reflect on more aspects of your life with the chart. But Taurus is fixed earth, and this has to do with once we got through Aries season, the initiation, we come out, we're like rising again, fresh after the winter. And there's work to do in Aries. There's a lot of like heavy lifting of like getting motivated and getting inspired. Now, when we get to Taurus season, we can sit down for a minute. We can notice the fruits of our labor. This is to me, it's such a privilege to get into Taurus season, because we're able to observe the hummingbirds flying around, and oh my gosh, my elderberries are blooming, and there's like flowers on my elderberry tree. They're just starting to bloom. So Taurus is about getting into pleasure, the basic pleasures, okay? Because then we look at Scorpio on the other side. There's more of an intensity of the complexity of life. And then the complexity is where there's still pleasure in that, but now we're edging into where pleasure becomes pain and pain can be pleasure, and there's more nuance and complexity in Scorpio. So but when we're in the Taurus season, it is not complicated, it is very simple. One thing that I want to mention about this, over the years, there's a book called, I don't know if you have this book, I recommend it to everybody. The Oh my God, I read it every year, and the name, it's right there on my bed. It's like skipping the 13 Grandmothers.
Mm.
That book about I'll grab it when you're talking.
Okay.
Basically, something that I read in there, I read it every year, and it goes through the different months or moods. And something that I read was about Taurus being so in the moment of simplicity in the body, being able to have this like very embodied psychic experience that a lot of people will overlook because they're thinking of like Taurus being a cow that's just standing in the field grazing, but not really thinking so much about the experience of being so connected with nature that you can smell when the rain is coming. And so there's this wisdom of Taurus that is so simple, but we have completely forgotten about it because we've gotten so complex. And so the invitation at during Taurus season is to remember the simplicity of our body's technology, our ability to see things that are really one of the gifts of my daughter has this psychic ability of stating the obvious. So what does that bring up for you, Megan?
So I'm feeling into the polarity of Taurus and Scorpio as well. And I feel, as you're saying, like the pleasure exists so much in Taurus, but also in Scorpio in these ways too. And another way I really like to understand it is through comfort and discomfort. Like in Taurus, there's that, like the experience that's so essential and vital to be embodied and to experience that deep embodied experience. And then
Mm,
in Scorpio, we expand, and to really understand that Taurus and Scorpio are on a polarity. So they're two sides of the same coin. So we're talking about the same thing from two different, like on two ends of the
mm,
spectrum, two extremes of the
mhm,
same thing. And I feel like they are about our, yeah, our ability to connect into that deep body technology that's also a part of, just life, like being coming through birth and death, because
mhm,
Taurus would also be the opening, the birthing, while Scorpio is the taking, returning, and the death. And Taurus being the embodied experiences, while Scorpio leads us to the out of body experiences. And there's in Taurus, as you're talking about this deep presence, it's like the art of being. I kind of broke this down at one
mhm,
point where each of the signs in my expression, if each one is an art. Taurus is the art of being,
mhm,
or you could say embodying, while Scorpio is the art of holding space. So there's that kind of, like, you go through one to get to the other a lot of the times with those embodied and out of bodied experiences. That's something that
mhm.
comes up with the polarity between Taurus and Scorpio.
Oh, yay. Good. So let's talk more about the moon being full in Scorpio at 4 degrees. So we'll look at our charts and see what's there between like 0 and 8 degrees, because the moon is going to be moving quickly. So it already has been at 0 degrees. It's going to reach 4 degrees at around 4:50 p.m. at the time of fullness. So we look at our charts and see like, where is this in our life? And 8th house and 12th house are the two houses that have the most connection with the spirit world and with shamanic practices. When I say shamanic, I'm talking about bridging life and death, which is what the polarity of Taurus and Scorpio is. And so when we look at Scorpio, it's like my first thing that it's so relatable for me. If you've ever had a loved one die, there's like, they didn't leave. It's like the space that Megan mentioned, space, it's like the space that they used to occupy in your life, in your house, is still there. It's just now the visible feature of the person is not there. And so that energy that we feel, like, oh God, it's like, it's excruciating, but it's the most beautiful, sexy thing ever, that you're like on the, like, it's like in Tantra yoga, there's a practice where we'll start to make the sound of the K, like there's a, and it's the feeling of like the anticipation of the thing. Like if you try to, it's like, what is there's you, this anticipation of that moment of being in that, like, and that is it's like my very sloppy way of talking about something that is so hard to talk about, really. The same way with Pisces and 12th house things. It's like, it's not, it's everything and nothing. So we look at our charts and see, first of all, where is Scorpio on your chart? Because that's the area of life where you experience most of that. Death isn't the right word. It's like, and going, it's like going in so deep into the body that you go beyond the body, but it includes the body. And then we're in this other space of what, when I say shamanic, it's like the connection that we have when we're in a ritual. Like I do ancestor worship. When I'm in a ritual and I can, you feel that they're there, that they've answered the call. We're calling them, doing whatever the thing is, singing a song where we call them. And then the moment you feel the presence there, then you're like, you've crossed that bridge between life and death. And there's this moment of like, it's very powerful, power filled. And so, yeah, what does that bring up so far?
Yeah, I'm still thinking about that sense of like that out of body experience. It's not like how you said, it's through the body that we're able to go to those kind of, that shamanic place, like with that thread, that connection, or as you said, our ancestors, the other, like all spirit. It's this polarity between Taurus and Scorpio is like as life and death. And so it's the experiences that transcend the veil between what is physical and the importance of those touchstones for us to have the experience at all, to also understand the other that is just beyond the veil, that is just outside. We have both to understand the other. So
Right.
I'm feeling into that as well. And do you want to go through the like everyone, like your rising sign, like for yours, Taurus rising, right? So this is Scorpio. You know that Scorpio is the.
Yeah, let's go into the Pluto thing and add in some of that, and then we'll go through and just give everybody a little idea of what, if you know your rising sign. If you don't know your rising sign and you want to get the most out of this next section we're going to do, just look on, I use astro.com. You could use AstroSeek or any of the platforms and type in your birth information and find out your rising sign. And so one more thing I wanted to mention about Scorpio, as Megan was talking, something that came up in my mind was that because I do have Taurus rising, I often find myself in interactions that are very Scorpionic in nature. And this is something that came up, is somebody who I was recently relating with, who is a Scorpio rising person. And something that I kept experiencing, and I found myself like, I've never experienced this before, was like, this is too much pleasure, to the point that I'm getting sick. Like, it's too much of being in that, like, he's, like, oh, this molecule, and let's do this. I didn't do any of the molecules or anything like that, but I'm like, bro, you do that stuff like that. You live in that amount of heightened heightened sensuality, to the point of like, I will blow my circuits if I have such a out of body. Well, you can never go out of your body, or it's really like an inward, you like spiral in so deep that you explode into everything. And I imagine that this is a similar process to death, where you have like you can go so deep into yourself that everything that ever has been and ever will be is revealed to you, and it is so intense. It's like having 5,000 orgasms at once, and you're just like, like there is such thing as too much pleasure. And with Scorpio, what we are exploring is, where is that line between something pleasurable becoming painful? And it's like, I think I'm going to actually die, because the pleasure is so intense so Scorpio is also where we're constantly edge walking. We have to find out, I mean, not all of us, because if you have a heavy Scorpio in your chart, what I'm about to say will make sense to you. If you don't, some people don't have any planets in Scorpio. It's an aspect of everybody's life, but it may be not something that you're personally working so much. But what I'm going to say is this, that this sometimes you have to go to the edge and cross the edge to know where the edge is, because there can be in life where we're experiencing, say you get drunk, or this is like so not my level of consciousness, I'm not in this area anymore of life, I passed that, thank God. But where you're like, you have a buzz and you feel good, you've had like one glass of wine, you're in Taurus area of like, this feels good, my muscles relaxed, and I'm like, okay, I can really sense myself more, and I feel, one glass of wine. Then you have 2, 3, 4, and you get into like out of control. But you had to find where that level was. So Scorpio is the edge walker, meaning that you're finding when you cross the line, at some point you have to cross the line to know where the line is. And we're not, I'm not shaming any of that, because it is a very valid part of everything we do. We start working with energy, and we get to like, this is very part of my life, where I like finding out what I can do with non-physical form, like what I can do with energy. One of my shamanic practitioner teachers that I used to study with, she was like, whoa, you're blasting me. Like, this is too much. So I'm like, ooh, and sending all this energy. And she's like, you're like a fucking fire hose. Can you tune it down to like a garden hose? And so like learning where your edges are. And so this full moon is illuminating that part of your life, whether you have planets there or not. This is the material we're working with. And if anything that I said just now sounds scary or intense, it should, because that's what Scorpio is about. It is scary and intense. And it is super powerful, and we are not trained how to work with power. We're not trained how to work with the spirits of the dead, with the spirits of the land, with our ancestors, we're not trained in any of that stuff, and there is a very good reason why we're not trained in it. And so if you feel that is something that you're curious about, leave a comment in the thing. I'll probably send you some resources, something free that you can start to access and work with that today. Okay, so do you have something you want to say?
I just really wanted to use the word threshold the whole time you were talking about that. Like that's where I get that feeling of like holding as well with Scorpio, because it's really about like the threshold of how much you're holding in that space, and it's gonna vary and be different for everyone, like you said, based on your own your own scorpionic codes in your consciousness, based on the way Scorpio lands within your chart. But that experience of crossing that kind of threshold barrier to understand what that threshold is, I feel like is kind of the overall universal thing of Scorpio. So
Yes. Yay, I love Scorpio. I just forgot
yeah,
how much
me too.
until I started talking about it. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is my shit right here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm Scorpio. I have Pluto, but that's the generation of Pluto and Scorpio, and that's it. It's my third house, and my eighth house is empty, and but I still love working with Scorpio.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's bring in Pluto now. So,
Oh
what's
yeah,
the more most natural thing to talk about would be
Pluto.
Pluto, and I do want to add in how Venus and Mars are playing into this full moon by being the planetary rulers of the Sun and Moon right now. But looking at Pluto, we have Pluto at 2 degrees, and I think that says 6 minutes of Aquarius. So making not perfect. But it is close enough, and by the end of the day, Moon and Pluto will be in a perfect 90-degree angle. So Pluto seems like a very central piece of this full moon. Now let me remind you that full moons, while they are a culmination of one moon cycle, the full moon touches in with the previous 6 months ago when we were in Scorpio season. We had a moon cycle that would be connected to this moon cycle, and then 6 months later we're going to have another lunation that's going to be in Scorpio again, and then Taurus. So it's this axis is activated again in the next 6 months. So this full moon connects those two. It's always going to be, there's always a connection happening. So you can think back 6 months ago and like, oh, what was going on in my life and where was I with this energy that is being spoken of right now. And then so we're Pluto is carrying us into the next lunation that we'll have on this axis. So it's important to consider what Pluto is about. And so if you are above 38 years old, you have had a Pluto initiation. We all get one for sure. We all are guaranteed one interaction with Pluto. That is the Pluto square. When Pluto in the sky becomes in a 90-degree angle with Pluto on your chart. Today is a reenactment of that energy. So if you've had that transit happen, it's very easy to tell. Everybody goes through it, and there is something that is remarkable about, and it can happen as early as 33, and it can happen as late as 40, because Pluto doesn't have a super steady cycle. So for instance, Pluto was in Capricorn for like 16 years. Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for like 20 years. So it's not always going to be the same. So what that initiation is coming to your real power. You're finding the source within yourself that is connected to the source of all things. And so what happens during that Pluto initiation is the breaking down of everything that isn't your power, meaning that there's something in you, like when Aladdin goes into to get that lamp. Everybody knows the story of Aladdin and the magic lamp, or the genie in the lamp, or whatever. He's tricked, first of all, to go in there and get the lamp because he's pure of heart. He's innocent. So it's like us going in, and I love, oh gosh, I love seeing people who haven't had their Pluto initiation yet, because there is this like, ah, yay, this innocence that's so beautiful and lovely. And then that's like Aladdin going in, like, hey, go in here and get this lamp. It's like magical, and it's going to be so cool. So they're like, okay. And they go in there to get the lamp and give it. And then the person like shoves Aladdin back into the cave, takes the lamp, but the lamp does fall back in. Aladdin does end up having the lamp. It's completely dark. All of this to say that there is the genie, which is your inner genius that comes out. And when you have nothing, everything that you thought was important gets taken away. During the Pluto initiation, there is a huge death process happening. And actually people may die during your Pluto initiation. A lot of people who I've read for are like, this person died or that person died. You probably won't die. That would be too easy. So actually, it's like things actually will leave your life that you value so much. And some things that you don't value, but it's a death process. So in that process, your inner genius is able to come up, and it's this glorious finding of your true power that you get drug into it in a way. It's like, I would have never wanted these things to happen that happened during my Pluto initiation. I would have never signed up for that stuff. But through those things happening, all this other stuff, I started reading astrology for money instead of doing it for free. I started making jewelry for money instead of doing it for free. A lot of it had to do with like really valuing my true gifts. I remember one time during that waking up and being like, how rude of you to take the gifts that you have and just giving them away for free. It's like so disregarding to God, to the spirit of everything that, so this Pluto square is like really bringing up your inner genius. And what I would like you to do, if you are any kind of way astrologically literate, you can do this. If you're not, you can still do it, but without using your chart. So if you do know astrology and it makes somewhat sense to you, look at Scorpio and look at Aquarius. See what houses those are for you. And then see what other planets you have there in those first, let's say those first 6 degrees or so. And I would probably even use a smaller, like a 3-degree orb, just because it's not exact right now. But just looking at that area of your life and noticing what, okay, now also, if you don't know your chart, this will still pertain to you. Notice what in your life has become a block or a distraction or a weight. It's dead. It can be something you love that is keeping you from doing the next thing. I love body work. I massage my kids. If I don't have a client scheduled that day, I love it so much. And also I recognize that going to do a session, say I'm doing a 2-hour session, which I do every week, a 2-hour session with this one person. That is taking away about 3 hours of my life that I could be working on my YouTube channel and my astrology school. And so I'm like, oh, you know, so during this square, it's like looking at what, and I want to use the words that it's specific to my chart. So it's not going to be specific for everybody, but because I have that in the 7th house, relationships, my clients, my partnerships in business, what from those things have become a heavy dead thing, a dead weight that I'm carrying that is keeping me from doing the next thing that is really bringing out more of my power, Pluto in Aquarius. So look at that on your chart. If you need help with this, please feel free to reach out to me or Megan. We'll be happy to help you out with that. Just to get more specific, I have a Telegram group we share all the time, and it's free, and you can get free just little tidbits here and there, like, oh, that house means this and blah blah blah. That'll be down in the show notes. Okay, so I talked a lot. So Megan, let me ask you this. Looking at that square between Pluto and the moon, and then we have what's known as a T-square because Pluto is also making a 90-degree angle to the sun. How does that land for you, and what can you share about that?
Yeah, it really feels like it feels like it's understanding where it is in your, with a transit like this, understanding which house it is really going to help it land. I think you did a really good job of explaining that dead weight example, with really feeling like that's where there's that release. I feel like for me with this style aspect, when we have that T-square, with the full moon creating the polarity, the sun and the moon in those polarity, and then the Pluto bringing that square aspect to both the moon and the sun, that T-square thing that's going on, that feels to me like the feeling of being ripped apart, like the tension of being, like, there is a feeling like where you'll feel ripped apart because there's going to be something that is that dead thing that, like you said, things that you love will leave, like something that there's still kind of the attachment to. And I think with Pluto in Aquarius, it can also help us, it's really challenging, but it can help us open up to non-attachment, to really understand like the things that we feel attached to, it's really an illusion created in
Mm,
that space, which is kind of created in that Taurus space as well, because
mm,
in our Taurus consciousness, we enjoy being with things and people and like sensations and the comforts. Like we have the physical experience of being connected, which is different from that kind of attachment feeling. That's actually kind of a creates that block, like where you feel stuck, like you can't
mm,
actually move forward because there's that kind of trap or that cage of the attachment. So to really
mm,
recognize attachment is an illusion, and I think something that's really was helpful to me, and maybe hearing this little anecdote is helpful, is the things you feel are your attachments that's so hard to let go of. To recognize that it's not actually a cage that's surrounding you. And there's this kind of uh, metaphor story of how to catch a monkey. You put bananas in the cage, and so then the monkey will reach their hands to the bar of the cage and grab onto the bananas and be obsessed with getting that thing that it's holding on to, that it's already feeling it in its own hand. And you have to actually, like, the monkey's not actually trapped. The monkey could just let go of the thing that it's feeling attached to in that moment and be free. But
mm,
to like have your grasp on something you think is
mm,
what it's needed for you, to let go of it and take a step back, is where you'll feel that sense of detachment. That, but it feels like being ripped apart from the thing that you've made
mm,
contact with, connection with. So that's kind of what the feeling, I think a lot of us will experience, that kind of, yeah, like you said
mm.
before, if it sounds scary, well, it's because it is. If it's not uncomfortable at this time, then you're just skirting over it, and it's going to come up tenfold. Like you said, 6 months from now, when we're back in Scorpio season and this is all back up on the surface, it's just going to be hairier and uglier than if we just were to let it go at this moment. Like it's just going to be scarier. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. God, I love that because I could really feel the banana. You're like, I
Yeah.
just want this.
Yeah, I always picture that, like the little monkey, like, and I don't know, like if you've ever been around monkeys, like I know your time in Asia, like in India, that like monkeys really are like, they're funny like that. Like they would do that. Like they would reach in,
Totally.
hold onto that banana, and like, well, now the monkey's trapped because it's not going anywhere. And to see yourself like that, like you're not the one in the cage, it's the thing that's
Right. And so the reason I love that so much too is because Taurus is definitely about possessions. Scorpio is
mm,
about obsessions. So those
mm,
those two things, it's like the things that I'm not even kidding you. I almost don't even want to say it, but I have to it makes sense. I have this gold coin. It's like a 1 ounce gold coin. And I like every day I go check it and make sure it's still there. And I'm like, what would I do if that was gone? Because it is a possession that I love. And then it your possessions can become obsessed. You'd be like obsessed with them.
mm,
And so it's the tension between those things. I'm not saying they're good or bad or anything like that, but then when we have Pluto anchoring into a 90-degree angle to both of those things, it's like, well, what would happen if you didn't have that? Like, what would happen? How would you feel? What comes up? Now let's also bring in the fact that Venus has just gone into the underworld, no longer visible. When Venus is not visible in the sky, we are really working with an inward process of how we value ourselves, what we value in life. There is this inward kind of process that happens with Venus. Venus is going to be in the underworld until July 10th. We'll have a sighting of Venus around that time. Venus is already going to be all the way into like the 28th degree of Cancer by the time we see Venus again. So this whole area of our chart, Taurus, Gemini, and most of Cancer, we're doing this inward process with our values. So the sun right now being in Taurus, we look to Venus to see what is, this is like the next level, like a next layer of looking into nuance with what we're working with during Taurus season. We look at Venus. So we know Venus just went into the underworld at the later degrees. Venus is right now at 23 of Aries. So you can look at your chart. You don't really need to. All you really need to know is starting to ask yourselves questions about your values, what you find valuable, worthy of your time and attention. It's so awesome that the ruler of Scorpio is Mars, and those are also a polarity. So Mars being in Pisces right now, getting ready to have a conjunction with Neptune. Our bravado, our will, our desires. So I feel like a lot of times people get confused between Venus and Mars because of the fact that we are more of a Mars culture. Just in general, we're more solar, we're more Mars. Like there's more of like, let me go get the things that I want. And let me, there's more of we focus more on the external, and we focus more on having our desires met. We are not very, just culturally overall for, we all have very various ways of working with these energies, but Venus is going to be more of that. Like, I think of the Rumi poetry when we get into talking about longing, that be thirsty, like, don't just fulfill the thing, like be in the need. And it's like, oh, you need something? Ew. But being in the moment of that feeling of need, like, what do I need? And allow yourself to really, first of all, just question it. Because I feel like a lot of times it's like, I don't need anything. That's the initial like knee-jerk reaction because of where we're raised and how we're raised. Whether you're a woman or a man, female, male, however you think of yourself. As somebody told me yesterday, oh, I'm 80-20, 80% masculine, 20%. I was like, oh, cool. So I know everybody has different ways of how they relate with that. So however you relate with that, what do you need? And allow yourself to not answer that. Don't answer it right away. You have until July to be curious about, what do I need and what do I want? And so be in that longing with Venus. And then when we look at Mars, it's like, how do I go get that stuff that I want? How do I step out into, I think of Mars, everything about how we dress, how we're presenting ourselves, how we're moving, how we're taking action. And so this polarity is, I would say, a dominant feature of a Scorpio full moon. So we're asking those questions, and then knowing between our longing and our will, Venus and Mars, between the longing and will, we have Pluto there, who's like, do you really? And like, what if it's gone? And what is below the surface of that? What is the real thing that you're actually wanting? And what is it that you really actually want to do about that? Because at the surface, it's easy to be like, oh, I just want to be happy and have fun. Oh, really? Why? And what's below that? And what's below that? And if we take away this thing, what are you left with? And so that's kind of what we're working through with this moon cycle. And Megan, anything you want to add? And then if you want to start by taking us through the signs,
The rising signs.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to add was on now my brain already started jumping ahead to the rising signs. I'm all excited about that. But it was so clear when we were talking still just kind of about that T square, and then also and this was going on with Venus and Mars and the desires and the values. Something's got to, and then also as you were talking about possession and obsession, like that's an orientation for us as well, because Taurus and Scorpio are orienting us into like the embodied experience of incarnation. And like there's something that's very orienting to understand, what do you have and what do you want, and like that really like What do we really have that passion for? But to also mirror nature and earth, the way that she is constantly changing and transforming. There is no life without the death. So when it really comes to we have to recognize that we don't have one thing like indefinitely. Like everything is finite when it comes to what we have. With the obsession type things, it's like the more that we can embrace that we can have something for a moment, as an orientation for that time. And then kind of this feels like something's got to give for sure with the possession obsession aspect. That's going to be a universal experience during this full moon with that Pluto square. So going through understanding your signs, I think I'm going to do it a little like unconventionally, because right away I'm thinking like, okay, well, it's a cross. You kind of want to know what's going on in the house of Scorpio, Taurus, and Aquarius to really kind of pull back together this aspect we're talking about. So if you have one of the fixed risings, that's going to be the Taurus risings, the Scorpio risings, the Leo rising, and Aquarius rising. So if you are Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius rising, then this like full moon is going to be hitting somewhere along that the cross within your own chart that has to do with self relationship first. That would be Taurus and Scorpio risings. You're going to be along the axis of your first and your seventh house. First house is orienting around who am I? Seventh house orienting around who are you? So it's that relational aspect. And then the fourth and the 10th, that would be if you're having Leo or Aquarius rising, then the full moon is in the fourth, the 10th. I think maybe I'm making it a little more complex I can see it in my own head, but with Leo and Aquarius risings, you're going to have this between the fourth house, which is the house of your roots, like the nest, the deep root, the most inner like experience that you can, most invisible inner experience you can have. And then the 10th house is kind of the most public, external life oriented experience that you can have. So there's those two polarities. So we could go a little further and you can kind of help me with maybe giving that rising sign a little insight for this full moon. But specifically, we could start with Taurus rising. So for Taurus rising, the sun is in the first, the moon is in the seventh, and the Pluto is in the 10th. Is that right?
Yeah.
10th? Yeah. Okay, great. So that release, that was a perfect example for you, right? When you gave the example of body work versus the YouTube channel. Well, this has to do with your contribution to the world in the 10th house of what's got to give. So that's what we'll be able to understand as you go through your rising sign, see where is being illuminated. Taurus rising, you're being illuminated, what the inner current experience is going to be around how you're relating with others. Scorpio in the 7th, and then that Aquarius corner of it is what is going to be giving, releasing. Flip that, if you're Scorpio rising, that sun is on the relational side, the reflection is on the personal side, and that moves Aquarius into the 4th house. So the thing that is going to be released, the thing that's kind of the tear apart feeling, is going to be something that's happening deep under the surface for you. It may not be as obvious to everyone else, but you'll for sure be feeling it in a deep way. And it may even be connected to ancestral lineage things that are patterns breaking and shifting for the Scorpio risings. Now for the Leo risings and the Aquarius risings. So if you're, yes.
I just wanted to take a moment to add in something about what you just said. So for people with Taurus rising, having the full moon going through their 1st and 7th house, just to think a little bit about what is your orientation to relationships and to your partnerships in general, because 7th house is also I call it the marketplace. It's also like your people who you're sharing resources with. So business partners, marriage partners, people who you would invite over to your house for dinner. They're closer to you. And so for Taurus rising, you're really going to be looking at who you are in that relationship and who is in your house. Like, who do you invite over? Do your ancestors like them? So the spirits of your house, the spirits of the land that you're on, whenever that person comes over, what happens? Like, how does everything in the invisible field respond to that person, to that thought form, to the idea that you have? And so looking at all of that and then seeing how that impacts your public persona, your reputation. So the relations that you have definitely influence your reputation. And so then if you're Scorpio rising, the full moon is happening in your who you are section. So the thing that's being illuminated is, what are you bringing to are you even working with the spirits? That's what when I look at the Scorpio rising people, I'm like, are you even working with the invisible realm? Because we're not trained to do that. Most people aren't. Most people are not. And it's like, okay, so you're unconsciously bringing all this energy. Maybe you're drinking, maybe you're using drugs. Scorpio rising, I can almost guarantee that you are, unless you're, and because that is part of the thing. It's like getting into that different kind of state. So checking in with that and then seeing, because Taurus season, this entire cycle is going to be illuminating by the sun being in your seventh house, your relationships, and then how those are impacting your home life. And I really wanted to emphasize this because of the person that I was relating with since a while ago. We have this polar thing going on where he's Scorpio rising and he's actually like doesn't know where he lives right now. So that fourth house being your home and roots, and being like, oh, I live here, and hold this thing for me while I'm traveling over here, and maybe I'm going to go there. And so where is your ground? And even if you are homeless or without a stable home, this is a call to finding home within your body, and starting to build inner architecture that holds and supports you. So where is home for Scorpio rising? Where is home? And that's your meditation to work on. Okay, go ahead. Next sign.
So then we would do Leo rising. So there, with Leo rising, the full moon is in the fourth. So we're going to have the Pluto in the seventh, and then the sun in the 10th. So if you're a Leo rising, you're going to feel that kind of tension breakaway point in the relationships. And that's kind of with the full moon illuminating how you're really like nourishing. Because I also think with home, with the fourth house, as you're talking about, like that, where's your ground? And it's really back to that like orientation as well, for feeling that safety and that home within self, and how that affects that reputation or what you're able to contribute, because you're going to have that feeling of how like you're feeling within self, that home ground, home safety, like stability within a nourished self, where the full moon is for these Leo like risings. Then the 10th is like how well you're able to show up in that space feeling radiant and well is directly reflective of that root system, that nourishment. And the release may be a relationship, a person that in that seventh house of Pluto, that's like, or a way of relating. If it's not so obvious, like the person, is there a pattern that's still being asked to break, so that there'll be more of that space as we move through also the Venus underworld time from now till July, to kind of reflect on what are the values now that you've broken that old pattern of relating. So then anything you want to add for the Leo risings, or we could go to Aquarius risings?
Yeah, no, I think we can go. That was really good. I don't
Yeah.
have anything to add there.
Okay. So for the Aquarius risings, Pluto has entered the first house, which this is going to be a long time. I mean, if you're Aquarius rising and born during this time, while Pluto's transcending through, or Pluto transiting, I said transcending, but I feel like it still applies. Pluto in Aquarius right now, but yeah, that's going to be really kind of awakening yourself, because there's going to be a lot of constantly shedding who identity, like and that's going to continue over the next 20 years. That um, I'm feeling for that. That's not something I put too much thought into. So you're an Aquarius rising as we shift into these Aquarian times, but that's like um, feeling that, like becoming the like Zen masters of non-attachment in that zone, because there's going to be a lot of identity to shift and change. And then the full moon is in the 10th house, so the illumination with the full moon is in that zone of contribution to the world. So maybe also really like time where you're experiencing the fruits of the labor of that past version of yourself that is now also gonna transform to let the next kind of come through. Have you thought about that with Pluto being transiting through your rising sign? I mean, as I'm born with Pluto in my 3rd house, so I'll never experience Pluto transit through my like 1st house.
Yeah, so the say if you have your rising sign at 15 degrees Aquarius, it's not like the whole time you're under pressure.
Right.
So it's really just, it's a process, right? So my Venus is at 6 degrees Aquarius. So Pluto, I'm like, oh, something is happening here in my midheaven, in my contribution to the world and in my reputation. I'm like, oh, is there going to be a sex scandal that comes out? And I'm like, oh, I wonder. But it's only going to be at that degree for a year, 2 years, something like that. So that's my thought about the people with Aquarius rising. It's like, look at what degree point it is, and then overall for the 20 years, there's something changing there.
Yeah, good point. So to know more specifically, that timing would be more essential. Okay, so we can go to now. I'll do like the mutable rising. So if your rising is going to be Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, you're on the mutable rising cross. So if I'll just start with what is at the top of my head. So if you're a Virgo rising, then this full moon is in the 3rd house, and the sun is in the 9th at this time, and that Pluto T square is coming in from the 6th house at that 3rd house, 9th house axis of the full moon. So the moon in the 3rd house for Virgo risings can very much be illuminating your own thought patterns, the way that you're viewing things, the perception through which you're seeing things, and the way that you're choosing to communicate that. And with the sun in the 9th house, that's going to be illuminating the kind of polarity of learning new perspectives at the same time. And when you're opening up your thought patterns, the way you're viewing things, the something that's got to give is going to be habits, because that's going to be in the 6th house, and our thought patterns create our like our life is this just kind of structure around the way that we're thinking of what we're experiencing, the lens through which we're perceiving things through, and that's going to feed into what we do as habits, as habitual rituals, and that's in the 6th house. So that's something that's got to give is going to come from that place for the Virgo risings. The Pisces risings, you can feel that kind of the flips. So the moon is illuminating the 9th house while the sun is illuminating the 3rd house. So really illuminating that kind of the inspirations or the challenging perspectives, kind of confronting the belief systems. It's more beyond just kind of like your daily thoughts, like your daily little thoughts, but like the bigger, like the big T truths. You're like kind of confronting the belief systems, and something that may shift while this is going to be the 12th house that has Pluto happening. There may be like a whole new awakening to the belief system for Pisces risings with Pluto coming from the 12th house.
One thing I would like to add there is because the ninth house, what did you say? The sun is in the ninth house for the, yeah.
Let's switch. That's the moon. The moon is in the sun is in the ninth for Virgo risings. So it's moon in, if the full moon is in the ninth house for Pisces risings.
Okay, full moon is in the ninth house. Okay, so that axis between the third and the ninth, one thing that I would like to add is that the ninth house has also, it's called the house of God. So it's like our religious upbringing, our ideas about spirituality, and they call it long distance travel. It's like where you go to learn these things, and then how you are impacted from the growth of learning things that are bigger concepts and higher education. So I got my master's degree in this thing, and then how that is going to impact your day-to-day thought process and your little brief interactions that you have in the third house. Another thing I wanted to mention is that daily habits, the sixth house of health and wellness, and all the little things that you do to keep that running. One thing I wanted to mention about that is that you mentioned something about your thoughts impacting that. I just want to add in also the non-physical things that impact that. So it's like your body's awareness without you thinking about it. There's stuff going on that we don't even know, that we didn't even have a thought process about it. And so the sixth house can be very tricky, as well as the 12th house can be very tricky because it's beyond what we know. It's beyond even our thought process. So that's why it's really good if you have anything going through the 6th and 12th house to seek counseling, to either see a therapist or to get a nutrition counselor or to get a somebody to help you with your routine, because we all have blind spots, but especially in the 6th and 12th house, there's definitely, it is about blind spots in our health and in our consciousness in general.
That's really helpful. That's really good to know. So that's going to pretty much apply to any of these mutable risings. The Virgo and Pisces risings would have that Pluto aspecting the 6th or the 12th. So I think maybe a little more specific in that zone. But also talking for Gemini rising and Sagittarius risings. So if you are a Gemini rising, that is going to make Taurus your 12th house, where the sun is now, and Scorpio, the 6th house, where the moon is now. So that's going back to that kind of where you're talking about those zones of where we have those intricacies or those blind spots that are kind of in that subconscious part of our space. So the full moon for Gemini risings is in the 6th, and Pluto is in the 9th. So yeah, with Pluto, with the 9th house, I think of big T. I've had this like little expression, little T truth, big T truth, which would be 3rd house, be like the little thoughts or the little truths. And then 9th house is like the big truths, like you said, that's those religious things, those God, like your spiritual path, which is going to be like a big umbrella that then all those little T truths exist under. So that 9th house is for the Gemini risings is where Pluto is going to be kind of helping pull something out, and that can feel like that tearing out that I've always believed in this, and now it's like a betrayal to not have that belief supported. And that full moon in the sixth house, okay, there may be a way the universe kind of sits you down and has you reorient mental health or physical health and any sense of the health, and that's that way. Yeah. And anything to add there for the Gemini rising?
No, that was great.
Yeah, Sagittarius rising, this is going to be full moon in the 12th house and Pluto in the 3rd house. While the sun is currently illuminating the 6th house. So the full moon in the 12th house, ooh, I mean, like it's like 12th house, I don't even word it, you know? I mean, when I see clients going through 12th house stuff, I'm like, this is a good time to do nothing. Like, don't make plans. Like, maybe take a silent retreat. Like, no, seriously, like this is a time to really allow yourself that spaciousness for the universe to be, or God, or whatever you want to say, to have all power, like surrender. Like, I'm like, go sit in on an AA meeting, even if you're not an alcoholic. They've got a lot of wisdom on this kind of zone of life. Surrender, surrender into the higher powers, and just like serenity prayer. Serenity prayer. I like release like the things I cannot control. So, because that's gonna kind of, it's hard to pin, like you can't pin down that area of life. So it's hard to kind of put that. It's those the intangible, unfathomable, like zone of working with the higher self, and it's that blind spot. So maybe it is a good time to, if you're gonna do anything, as I first said, don't do anything, but dream and let your dreams be the kind of guide, or also find like a counselor that can help you further translate, but like analyze what's going on in the subconscious at this time.
Let me add something right here, because the 12th house and the 8th house are my specialties.
Yeah.
Just because of how much, it is such a mystery. I have my Mercury in the 12th house, and it's in Aries, and there's all this. I've been going through so much with the North Node being in my 12th house, and
Wow.
yeah, one thing that was has been really helpful for me was Erica McNeese is a hypnotherapist, and so hypnotherapy is even better than analyzing. Analyzing would be more of a 6th house. The 12th house is going to be somebody who is able to ask you questions and guide you into your subconscious terrain, doing dream work. If you have any experience, if you don't have experience with things, it's not like necessarily a great time to just blindly go into those things, because the 12th house is a place that you don't dabble in, because you can actually lose your mind. You can actually like get really diluted, because it is the whole sea of consciousness, and it's your whole sea of consciousness. So definitely get help if you need guidance there, because it's so serious. And I know I'm saying this because I've got the North Node going through there, and it is so serious. It's like you can actually die right now. So please get help if you have things going on that are anything of what we're talking about between the 6th and the 12th house.
Good stuff. That's all the mutable risings. So the last one would be the cardinal rising sign. So Aries rising, Cancer rising, Libra rising, or Capricorn rising. So if you are an Aries rising, you are going to have the sun in the 2nd house right now, while this full moon is illuminating the 8th house. And so the 11th house would be where Aquarius is, with Pluto for Aries risings. Oh yeah, of course, it's Aries rising, so same. So Scorpio full moon, 8th house. Aries rising is like, so because why I'm saying that, for those that are like new to our astro lingo, is the 1st house is corresponding to Aries. Second house corresponding to Taurus. So for those that have Aries risings, the house is always going to be corresponding to its like it's always going to be matched with its corresponding sign. So full moon in the 8th house. Do you want to just go ahead and jump on that one with 8th house specialty as well?
Yes, the quick like cheat sheet version of 8th house. I always think of sex, orgasms, death, and it's regeneration of power. And so it also connects us to our generation. So the 8th, do you say the moon is in the 8th house?
So yes, the full moon is in the 8th house, yes. And then that
For
puts
Aries?
Pluto in the 11th, yes, for Aries risings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're saying, yeah.
I was like, I'm so bad at looking at the chart without actually looking at the chart. It's like completely doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, so the 8th house is also our legacy. It's also like what was left to us through our ancestors, through those who came before us. Our legacy is not just the wealth, but it includes wealth. 8th house includes wealth that was left to us. So it's your inheritance. And it's also wealth that is you're inheriting through those who came before you. And it doesn't even have to be blood ancestors. It can be like that. It's like, I think about ancestors of the land that I used to live on when I lived in where I grew up. So I grew up in Arizona. So the ancestors of those lands, things that I inherited through being in because I've always been super connected with those things. So for you, your 8th house, you think into what have you inherited, and this can be where they get generational curses and generational gifts, inheritance. So there's that. And then the reason I bring in sex and death and orgasms and all of that and other people's money, well, because that's what the 8th house is. But also I think about if you, oh my gosh, I guess we can talk about it. It's my channel. I was gonna say, can I talk about this? But the moment that you're getting ready to reach an orgasm, there's like this in Tantra yoga, we call it kumbhaka, which is a breath pause. And it happens. It's like you can't control it. There's a loss of control in the 8th house. And you will never have an orgasm if you're unable to lose control. It's such a like, oh, you have to be able to lose control. There is a loss of control regarding death. You don't know who's going to die when they're going to die. And to be able to go into that loss of control, that's what's up for you right now. Ooh, good luck.
Yeah. Yes. Mhm. Yeah. It's like there's a surrender or a faith process that comes with that. Yeah. You have to let go of the idea that you know what's best also. And so then, let's see, Libra rising is going to have the full moon in the 2nd house. So on the like flip of what we were just talking about with the 8th house, and that's like what you're saying with that loss of control, it's like that uncomfortable thing. I feel like with the full moon in the 2nd house, well, Taurus is kind of that season for Libra risings to be in their 8th house, as the sun is in the 8th house right now. So it comes back to that story of like a possession and obsession, and also just embracing pleasure overall with the moon. Like, do you like, especially like the Libra rising? I'm like, do you subscribe to the idea of guilty pleasures? Are you like the person that's always like, oh, my guilty pleasure? Like, and can you take guilt out of that? Like, can you practice being like, oh, my pleasure, yay? And like, where does that kind of expression like? How does that land? Like, if that's something where you're like, okay, yeah, that's totally me. Like, I'm like, and I have some like people really close to me with Libra rising, like lifelong like friends and family members, and like there is just the Libra way of like kind of the, I don't know, it's reminding me of the guilty pleasure thing, and I want them to practice that release of the guilt in front of it and just be in the pleasure practice, and really recognize pleasure as the fuel as well, like the kind of the motive, like the motivation, because so often pleasure's like the reward, rather than the like the essential, like the priority up front. Like to be in your pleasure, so like you get to, you know, move through all the other, uh yeah. And then with let's see, Cancer rising, full moon in the 5th house. So full moon in the 5th house, sun Taurus season is 11th house timing, and then Pluto is coming in through the 8th house. Pluto's in the 8th house for Cancer rising. So Cancer rising having the full moon in the 5th, feel like the focus now is through creative energy, and there's also just an energy of playfulness and curiosity to me with the 5th house, like to be in creation, but not like the point where you're like, oh, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to like produce it in mass and sell it as a product and like have this like end goal for like what you're doing it for, but really just to be in the playful creation where you're like, oh, and what if I just did it this way? Because you're kind of just making it up as you go along, and that's truly where the kind of creative process is flourishing and blooming, to do something just for the sake of play, like to enjoy. And there's a layer of pleasure there as well to kind of get into that when you further are now, okay, pleasure is here like as a baseline. I feel like pleasure has its own layers to it. Like there's the pleasure of comfort, like having a roof over your head and having food to eat and clean water to drink. That is a baseline pleasure that can then expand into, now that those things are met, we can really play and enjoy and frolic amongst it. And then it goes even deeper into those kind of like orgasmic, like pleasures, that discomfort, that kind of threshold push. But in the 5th house, there's that this creative, playful zone. Some risk too, like just in that sense. Okay, and then Capricorn rising would be our last one. So Capricorn rising is going to have the full moon in the 11th house. So full moon in the 11th house. Oh, this is a good time for, yet again, like kind of a disconnect, like a mental retreat, or like just it is a great time for networking that is goes like so beyond. Like I think recently I've been thinking of 11th house as our way that we are woven in, like networked in, like on a deeper level. So it's also the way that we're kind of predestined to these kind of coincidences that are actually coincidences, that are like these cosmic connections that are part of our experience, to also be woven into what is meant for you to be connected to be networked into. So the focus with the full moon for the Capricorn risings, full moon being in the 11th, where that Pluto square is coming from the 2nd house. What are your thoughts on this one? I'm feeling.
Yeah, so possibly something needing to be transformed, regenerated in the way that you feel secure, to be able, because the 2nd house has to do with security. So we talk about second house, like money and your house and all of that, but really what it's getting to is, do I feel secure? So if the full moon's in the 11th house, there's something that is being illuminated about your connection to your community, who you are in the community. And the community in the 11th house isn't like, a real community is diverse and there's different people. The 11th house community is about people who are like-minded, who it's also your goals, dreams, and aspirations, and the people who share the same goals, dreams, and aspirations. So it can be kind of echo chambery in the 11th house. And so there's something needing to be transformed in what makes you feel secure and what attachments that you have to security in order to fully illuminate this 11th house. I feel like people with Capricorn rising are big parts of changes that are happening in our structure. So your community and people who you share goals, dreams, and aspirations with needs to be changing right now. And so that Pluto being in the second house is helping to break down stuff that you feel that you needed for security and changing to a new level. Like, I don't even know what is possible for you for security. So that's going to be something that you're holding as a question. Like, what makes me feel secure? Do I feel secure even if I don't have a house anymore? Or do I feel secure? Like, you got to answer those questions, and it's going to impact how the new illumination is happening in your 11th.
Yeah, it's a timing where you're having to kind of reorient what is secure, I feel like.
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe
definitely.
once it was a house, but now there's no way it can be that, and also you continue to be in your, in your intention and purpose. You have to find, like, regenerate that security in something different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
I like that too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was so fun. There's, I think, just a few people in the chat. So if anybody has anything, or if you have anything else you want to add about anything that we've covered, I feel pretty complete. So,
Yeah.
well, that was so fun. I loved, we went super deep into all the signs, and the
Yeah.
replay will be up. Oh, Megan, before we go, do you have anything you want to share about stuff that you're doing or things that you have going on that you'd like people to know about?
I would really just love for people to know that I am, like, building a nature retreat in Floyd, Virginia. So I know people are watching this from all over the place. And if Floyd, Virginia is for some reason on your map, just make sure you're connected with me so we can, kind of join in that space. I'm really just kind of honed in on doing my work there. It's a really magical piece of land, and there's so much going, like, coming and growing through um, just community in physical presence with one another, and permaculture and spring water and solar power, and it's all exciting. And the only, like, connection I still have online is I'm still doing my readings through the platform of Zoom. So that's the way to work with me online right now. Other than that, travel to Floyd, Virginia, and see what I've got going on there. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see you again.